All right, let's get right into this explainer. Today, we're diving deep, and I mean literally descending into the fascinating, often totally misunderstood, and frankly super intense eighth house of astrology. When you look at a chart, this is the space that exists just under the surface. It's completely dedicated to transformation, shared resources, and those powerful legacies we inherit from other people. So, fair warning, we're not talking about the light, breezy side of life today. This is all about profound depth, our deepest connections, and that really intense psychological growth that only comes from life's most pivotal transitions.
You know how traditional astrology treats the seventh house, right? It's all about partnerships, the romance, the big wedding, the union. But what happens after you ride off into the sunset? The eighth house is your reality check. It moves way past that initial honeymoon phase and asks a much heavier question. What is the actual true cost of merging your life with someone else's? If the seventh house is the marriage, the eighth house is merging the bank accounts. It's sharing a roof, figuring out who's paying for the busted plumbing, and navigating the incredibly complex emotional intertwining of two separate lives. To really crack the code here, you have to look directly across the astrological wheel to the second house. If the second house is the mine, my money, my stuff, my personal assets, the eighth house completely flips the script. It is the ours. We're talking strictly about the assets of others. Bank loans, taxes, and inheritances you might get from a loved one, they all live right here. It highlights the actual value, the substance, and sometimes the heavy baggage our partners bring into our lives. But hey, this is definitely not just a financial ledger. It's the house of profound transformation, that really intense process of changing from one state of being into another. We're talking about legacies, and that doesn't just mean inheriting a sudden pile of cash. It includes ancestral talents, or even those heavy inherited psychological traits passed down through your family tree. It's an invisible depth that deals with all the hidden things that absolutely demand our introspection, forcing us to confront the value of the other. It's a profound, sometimes shadowy space of real responsibility. Now, technically speaking, in traditional astrology, the eighth house is what we call a succedent house. It basically operates in our blind spot. Because it simply follows the angular seventh house, historically astrologers actually called it an idle or inactive place. Why? Because it literally doesn't have a direct view or aspect back to the first house, which represents the self. And that unique positioning is exactly what gives this house its elusive, under-the-surface vibe. It governs those internal psychological landscapes and private financial realities that we intentionally keep hidden from the outside world. And it goes so far beyond just debts and taxes. Think about the borrowed nature of our entire existence. We're literally just borrowing these physical bodies, and eventually we have to return them to the earth. Because of that ultimate reality, the eighth house becomes the space where we learn the absolute value of quality control in our relationships. We realize that the people we partner with, the ones we fully merge our lives and our resources with, they deeply, deeply affect our own sense of self-worth and substance. So what actually happens when planets drop into this hidden zone? Well, if your sun is here, your core identity is really defined through deep interactions. You might find huge success in hidden or occult corners like research or psychology. You're the person everyone turns to when things get deep. Moon here, that brings immense emotional intuition. Your nurturing side comes out by managing family assets or just effortlessly sensing the subtle undercurrents in your relationships. And Mercury? Mercury becomes this analytical detective. You can navigate complex financial documents or the shadow side of the human psyche with total ease, using communication as your ultimate key to intimacy. Moving on to the planet of love and value. If your Venus is hanging out in the eighth house, you possess this incredible, almost magical ability to turn a straight-up debt into a shared investment. Your love language involves serious, deep devotion, and you bring a really harmonious vibe to shared finances. A lot of times, Venus here actually manifests as financial windfalls through marriage or inheritance. It points to a transformative kind of love that values a true soul connection above literally everything else, turning what others might see as messy entanglements into incredibly supportive, prosperous unions. Now, what happens when the planet of action lands in the house of invisible depths? Mars in the eighth house brings fierce willpower and an incredibly energetic focus to shared resources. Listen, while a lot of people might naturally shy away from intense psychological digging or highly stressful financial negotiations, Mars actually thrives in the fire. If you've got this placement, you love the aggressive challenge of fixing what's broken or winning through strategic partnerships. You face transitions head-on, which often draws you toward high-stakes careers. Think emergency medicine, surgery, or intense financial turnarounds. Jupiter in the 8th house is traditionally considered a massively fortunate placement. As the planet of growth and expansion, having Jupiter here is often considered the manna from heaven placement. And yes, that can literally mean sudden financial windfalls or significant inheritances, basically making you the recipient of an ultimate cosmic benefactor. But it also brings this generous, optimistic energy to how you handle shared wealth. Mentors are usually super eager to share their knowledge with you. And even more importantly, it fuels a profound spiritual quest for truth, helping you find genuine joy even during life's heaviest moments of transformation. Now let's talk about Saturn, which we all know is famous for its association with boundaries and discipline. Having Saturn in the 8th house brings serious responsibility and maturity to how you handle shared obligations, debts, and taxes. Sure, initially Saturn might feel like a heavy weight or a really inhibiting force because of all those obligations. But over time, that weight transitions into incredible psychological resilience. You become the absolute rock in a partnership, securing the long-term foundation. Your financial rewards or inheritances might come a bit later in life, but they're built like a fine wine, substantial, enduring, and proving that real power actually comes from restraint. I know some of you are probably reflecting on your own astrological charts right now thinking, wait a minute, what if I look at my 8th house and there are absolutely no planets sitting there? It is a super common misconception that an empty 8th house means you'll experience a total lack of transformation in your life or that you'll never get financial support from a partner. But if you're panicking about an empty 8th house, take a breath. That just isn't how astrological houses work. The real truth is, an empty 8th house simply means your life's primary focus is probably aligned with other houses in your chart. You're still going to navigate these profound themes of debt, intimacy, and transformation, but you'll do it through the planet that rules the sign on your 8th house cusp instead. You just look at where that ruling planet is placed to see how you handle shared resources. Ultimately, an empty 8th house can actually feel pretty uncomplicated, letting you navigate life, death, and complex debts with a real sense of peace rather than constant, intense focus. Because even without planets, the zodiac sign on the cusp completely colors the landscape of this house. You can feel the stark difference between an Aries 8th house, which demands bold, almost impulsive transformation, versus a Taurus cusp that stubbornly seeks solid stability in shared resources. Whether it's Gemini intellectualizing all those deep, dark emotions, Pisces experiencing profound spiritual rebirth, or Aquarius taking a highly unconventional, detached approach to intimacy, the sign dictates how you navigate the depths. It completely sets the tone for your entire 8th house experience. At the end of the day, the absolute deepest takeaway from the 8th house is simply this: we are not alone. Our lives are inextricably intertwined with the legacies of those who came before us and those we choose to walk alongside today. Whether the legacy you inherit is a valuable stamp collection, a joint mortgage, or a highly complex psychological treat, the 8th house gives us the tools to transform those gifts into something that serves a much higher purpose. So look closely at the resources, the traits, and the complex legacies you've inherited. The 8th house is ultimately asking you one question: what lasting mark are you transforming them into for the next generation?